Hey folks, for a couple of years now I've been doing this series profiling relatively obscure Sonic the Hedgehog characters. I've had the pleasure of discussing plenty of previously forgotten Sonic characters who have in recent years experienced something of a resurgence in prominence and popularity. Fellas like Knack the Weasel, Bean the Dynamite, Bark the Polar Bear and Mighty the Armadillo all fit into that category. It's weird because this gaggle of characters all featured on either Lost or Wanted posters in one specific level in Sonic Generations back in 2011. I've talked about them all, except for this cute little guy, Ray the Flying Squirrel. This episode then feels significant and extra special, because it'll be the final character in this seemingly interlinked quintology of obscure Sonic characters. He's Mighty's best buddy, and ever since I put out my video profiling Mighty, Ray has easily been my most requested character to cover. It's a surprise because I'll inevitably cover a lot of the same ground here as in my Mighty video, but I've tried to dig up absolutely everything there is to say about Ray, and I've thrown in my own Ray-related conspiracy theory for good measure. So if you requested I cover Ray, hopefully I've done you justice. So without further ado, let's talk about Ray the Flying Squirrel. The story of Ray goes all the way back to 1991. Yes, honestly. In June 91, Sonic the Hedgehog released for the Sega Mega Drive, and it was an instant hit, popular with fans and critics alike. The game was such a success that a sequel was inevitable. One key feature envisioned for the sequel was a sidekick character to accompany Sonic on this second adventure. Sega Technical Institute held an internal competition that invited staff to pitch ideas for a potential sidekick character. Ultimately, of course, Yasushi Yamaguchi's Miles Tails Per Hour, the two-tailed flying fox, would win out and become Sonic's iconic sidekick, debuting in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in 1992. In recent years, though, a few other old sidekick designs have found their way onto the internet. One potential sidekick, designed by CTI's Craig Stitt, was Boomer the Turtle. Judging by the concept art, Boomer would have used his protective shell to travel over spikes, but would have been vulnerable, requiring Sonic's assistance if he found himself on his back. Ultimately, I'm glad that Tails got the nod over Boomer, but this second page of Boomer art is pretty interesting. There's a Kiwi sketch there too, and crucially, a short list of other potential animal sidekicks in the top left. The list includes Armadillo and Squirrel. It's also worth noting that Sega toyed with the idea of introducing colour-swapped versions of Sonic in a couple of different games. Take the obscure 1991 game Puzzle Construction, released for the forgotten Sega Terra Drive system, a hybrid Mega Drive/IBM computer, for example. Puzzle Construction actually predates the release of Sonic the Hedgehog. It features a Dr. Mario clone game in which the player has to match up red, yellow, and blue versions of Sonic. Although the gameplay differed, this tri-colour concept reappeared in 1992's SegaSonic Brothers, another falling block puzzle game featuring red, yellow, and blue Sonics. Obviously, judging by the name, there's the suggestion that the red and yellow hedgehogs are Sonic's siblings. Now, the Sega Terra Drive system and subsequently Puzzle Construction are incredibly rare, and Sega Sonic Brothers only received limited location testing in Japan before being scrapped, so ultimately both games would have been largely unknown to even the most ardent Sonic fans in the 1990s. I bring all of this up because I have a bit of a conspiracy about Ray. Ray first appeared in SegaSonic the Hedgehog, an arcade game released in 1993. The game featured 3 playable characters: Sonic the Hedgehog, Mighty the Armadillo, and Ray the Flying Squirrel. Can you see where I'm going here? I think Mighty and Ray were the result of the combination of 2 scrapped Sonic 2 sidekick ideas, merged with the tricolour Sonics from Puzzle Construction and Sega Sonic Brothers. What I mean is, I think the red and yellow Sonic siblings morphed into Mighty and Ray. Ultimately, that's all conjecture, but I like to think my theory makes sense. Anyway, here are a few proper early glimpses of Ray prior to his in-game debut. In 1992, Ray made an appearance alongside Mighty, Vector the Crocodile, and a host of other characters in the April edition of the Shogaku Gonensai manga. This one-off Japan-exclusive appearance seems to have been based on a slightly earlier piece of concept art by Naoto Oshima. There's also this really cool looking piece of Ray concept art from a 1992 German documentary titled Sega's Plan for World Domination, The Fantasy Factory. This little sketch of Ray is kinda cool. He's got a lot of personality here. Now let's discuss Ray's official in-game debut in SegaSonic the Hedgehog. The game released in 1993 as an arcade exclusive and was distributed to a tiny number of arcades outside of Japan, making it one of the lesser played Sonic games. Rather unusually, the game used a trackball control scheme to move the characters. There were plans to port the game to the Sega 32X or include it as part of Sonic Gems collection in 2005, but the unique control scheme proved to be a blocker, although it can be emulated and played quite faithfully on the Steam Deck, as shown here by Chowmix. The game has a simple story. In the opening cutscene, Ray, Mighty, and Sonic are captured by Robotnik and taken to jail on Robotnik Island that they have to break free from. The aim of the game is to use the trackball to escape Robotnik's dastardly traps at high speed. I actually find SegaSonic quite tricky. The control scheme is weird, but the gameplay is also unforgiving. Remember, this is an arcade game, so it was designed to swallow customers' coins. But it's a gorgeous little game, with bold, cartoony graphics and a fun little soundtrack. There's even voice clips for Robotnik and the three heroes too, which makes Ray one of the first voiced characters in Sonic the Hedgehog history. It's worth noting that Ray doesn't play differently from Mighty or Sonic and doesn't have the ability to fly in the game. SegaSonic has some really fun and lovely sprite work and animations, and the very limited amount of character that we see from Ray suggests he's a bit of a light-hearted comic relief character. Ultimately, Ray was designed by Manabu Kusunoki, who picked a flying squirrel for Ray and an armadillo for Mighty as Sonic's new buddies, because they had the same proportions as Sonic, and because they were relatively obscure animals. After SegaSonic the Hedgehog, Ray's comrade Mighty went on to greater popularity when he appeared in Knuckles Chaotix in 1995, but Ray, left behind, languished in obscurity, and because of that he was completely unknown to me personally as a kid, failing to appear, for example, in the UK's Fleetway Sonic the Comic series. In fact, when Sonic the Comic writer Nigel Kitching was asked about Ray, he admitted to not knowing who Ray was. Ray did make one cameo appearance in 1994's Gale Racer for the Sega Saturn, as one of a number of Sonic-themed dangling air fresheners that can be unlocked. He looks a little darker in colour, and maybe a little chonky too, but nevertheless this was Ray's home console debut. I've previously covered Mighty, Knack, Bean and Bark, so if you've seen any of those videos then excuse me for 1 minute because, just like all of them, Ray was actually in consideration to return as a playable character in 2003's Sonic Heroes, to team up alongside Mighty and Metal Sonic. I guess in that team, Metal Sonic would have brought the speed, Mighty would have brought the strength, and Ray would have been the flying character. Of course, that plan didn't go ahead. Much later in 2011's Sonic Generations, Ray appears in missing posters alongside Mighty, stating that they've been missing since 1993, the year SegaSonic the Hedgehog released. The artwork on the posters are just assets from SegaSonic the Hedgehog, by the way. Now, Americans might have a little bit of a different perspective on Ray. Ray may have been quite scarce in games and international media prior to 2017, but in the Archie comic book series, which ran between 1993 and 2016, Ray became something of a beloved and fleshed out character. Ray first appeared in Knuckles the Echidna issue 36 in 1999 in a flashback sequence, in which Mighty the Armadillo recounts first meeting Sonic the Hedgehog. Mighty, Ray and a group of Mobians had been captured by Robotnik before being freed by Sonic, who had infiltrated the group and pretended to be a prisoner. You could say that this initial prison breakout serves as a very rough adaptation of the SegaSonic arcade game. After being freed by Sonic and embroiled in a fracas with Robotnik's forces, Ray was transported to an alternate zone after grabbing the Power Stone, a stone with similar properties to the Chaos Emeralds that was fueling one of Robotnik's roboticizer machines. Ray found himself trapped in this other zone for 6 long years, before being rediscovered by his old buddy Mighty. Fortunately for Ray, time flowed a lot faster in said alternate dimension, so it didn't feel like 6 years for him. After being freed by Mighty, Ray became a member of the Chaotix, and as a valiant member, faced a whole bunch of enemies and baddies, such as Enerjack, Mammoth Mogul, and of course Dr. Robotnik, alongside the likes of Vector the Crocodile and Espio the Chameleon. Ray is characterized as quite light-hearted in the face of danger, describing battle as fun, a remark that earned him a scolding from Espio. Ray also joined the Chaotix in serving as a guardian of the powerful Master Emerald for a time too. In one notable incident, when guarding the Emerald with Vector, Ray resorted to using an interesting tactic when surrounded by hostile robots looking to capture the Emerald. He hopped on the Master Emerald and threatened the robots with a new, powerful Super Ray form, causing the robots to flee. It was all a clever ruse though. Ray didn't achieve this super form, at least not yet. It shows there is at least a little cunning side to Ray. I think the defining feature of Ray's Archie run was his close relationship with Mighty, and the complicated feelings that that relationship triggered in Ray. You see, in the Archie comic books, Ray is without any other family and has no memory of his parents. He is the adopted younger brother of Mighty. Their relationship is simultaneously one that's characterized as two close friends, but also sometimes is much closer to that of a guardian and a child. You could say that the relationship between Mighty and Ray is pretty similar to the relationship between Sonic and Tails. There's a lot of parallels. In Sonic the Hedgehog issue 212, it's revealed that Mighty has a long-lost sister, Matilda, and he intends to embark on a quest to track her down. Ray pleads to join him and Mighty agrees, so the two set off together and leave the Chaotix behind. The duo discover that Mighty's sister can be found in the vicinity of Sandblast City. It's during these escapades that we see different sides of Ray's character. When Mighty declares that he wants to speak to the leader of the Great Desert Dark Egg Legion alone to glean information about his sister, it causes an anxious Ray to worry and stress over whether Mighty will abandon him in favour of his sister if he ever finds her. I think this is more of a reflection of Ray's insecurities than it is Mighty's attitude towards Ray. What's quite interesting though is that when Mighty and Ray finally do find Matilda, who is a member of the aforementioned Great Desert Dark Egg Legion, she initially rejects Mighty because she has no memory of him. Ray goes ballistic, lambasting Matilda's heartlessness and reiterating the great lengths that Mighty went to be reunited with her. Despite his own fears, Ray took charge to support his older brother. Ray's words left an impact, because Matilda would later help the duo out on a couple of occasions, and Ray and Matilda would go on to consider each other siblings, united by Mighty. One interesting thing to note is Ray's design history in the Archie comics. He started off matching his fairly basic design in SegaSonic the Hedgehog, with bright yellow fur and red shoes very similar to Sonic's. Ray's design would be tinkered with a couple of times over the course of the comic's lifespan. First, Ray would gain a dark blue leather jacket, and later his red shoes would be changed to blue. In issue 175, the jacket colour would be changed to match the bright blue shoes, resulting in one of Ray's two iconic Archie designs. In this design, he also has this quiff that's very similar to Tails' too. Ray's look received a bit of an overhaul by Jeff Axer prior to the quest to find Matilda. It was partly intended to fix some common complaints that fans had with Ray's design. Ray's bangs were scaled back to look less like Tails, his muzzle was darkened, wing flaps were added, and the jacket was replaced with blue goggles and a scarf. This all made sense. The wing flaps were a great addition. Ray had never had them in the comic before and had always flown, I guess via magic or something, and the goggles and scarf were befitting of someone who's about to go on an adventure through an area called Sandblast City. The final look both looks better and makes more practical sense than his blue jacket look. One aspect of Ray's character that's worth noting is that when he originally appeared, as written by Ken Penders, Ray was written to have a stutter. Not every subsequent writer kept this character trait. But around the time of the Archie Comics Super Genesis Wave event, designed in part to purge the comic of Ken Pender's creations, it is a long story, believe me. Ray's stutter seemed to disappear. This change correlated with Ray and Mighty meeting and receiving training from an old sagely creature called Moss the Sloth, who helped to teach Mighty to master his temper. Some fans have speculated that Moss might have been responsible for helping Ray overcome his stutter. Behind the scenes, the stutter might well have been removed because it was a Ken Pender's creation, and of course the comic was trying to move in the opposite direction of Pender's, or because writers were fairly inconsistent in terms of keeping up with the stutter. Now, one final Archie note: a further redesign of Ray was set to appear in issue 294, an adaptation of the SegaSonic arcade game featuring Ray without any accessories but retaining the blue shoes. Unfortunately, the Archie comic was cancelled before this issue hit the shelves. Now back to the games. In 2017, Sonic Mania released to near universal acclaim. A game that felt like it picked up where Sonic & Knuckles left off. Mania was a classic game in every sense of the word, paying homage to and seeking to emulate the formula that made the Mega Drive quadrilogy so popular in the 90s. A year after its release, DLC was teased for the game, Sonic Mania Plus. The most shocking addition, at least for me, was 2 new playable characters: Sonic's old arcade buddies Mighty the Armadillo and Ray the Flying Squirrel. Mania Plus also added a new mode, Encore Mode, a slightly remixed version of the base story mode. It serves as Ray and Mighty's introduction. At the start of Encore Mode, we find the two trapped in a capsule. When Sonic frees them, he has to pick one to team up with. The one the player doesn't pick is revealed to be the heavy magician in disguise, and with that, Ray and Mighty were officially back in action. Around the time of Sonic Mania Plus's release, major Japanese gaming magazine Famitsu asked Takashi Iizuka to explain the addition of Mighty and Ray. This is what Iizuka said: "Sonic's Mania Lifeline is giving stimulus to fans' curiosities and expectations, so we thought of something that, if we added, would make it the most exciting, and the results were Ray and Mighty. There were people requesting for them, who appeared in the arcade version, to appear again. Personally, to me, they were to be sealed characters that would never be planned to be added to games. But in this title, we're squeezing in all series materials aimed for specific manias, so the stage for them to appear has already been prepared. In that case, we should unlock the seal." Obviously, their inclusion then is to treat hardcore Sonic fans who got a thrill out of all of the gesturing at the old games that Sonic Mania did. Ray feels like the trickiest of Sonic Mania's 5 playable characters to play well with. You could say that picking Ray's buddy Mighty with his protective shell is like playing Sonic Mania on easy mode, while Ray's harder to control ability of flight is a lot harder to utilize to your advantage and leaves Ray vulnerable. His power of flight looks and controls quite similarly to Cape Feather Mario in Super Mario World, and just like in Super Mario World, it's a lot of fun getting plenty of airtime with Ray. It makes me wonder what Mario's bright yellow cape is made out of. It's kind of weird that this is the first and only game Ray has appeared in where he can actually fly. He is a flying squirrel after all. It's worth noting that Ray's shoes in Mania are blue, matching his Archie redesign, which I think is a better look than his old red shoes and contrasts nicely with his bright yellow fur. Interestingly, pre-release concept art of Sonic Mania Plus shows Ray with the same shoes as Sonic. I wonder if his classic red shoes were ever in consideration. Another interesting note, Ray is able to utilize the power of the Chaos Emeralds to turn super and get all of those Chaos Emerald infused abilities and perks in Mania Plus, finally fulfilling the hollow threat he made many years prior in the Archie comics. Ray also appeared in the Sonic Mania Adventures series of mini-animations that were released around the same time as Mania Plus. In these cartoons, he flies onto the floating island looking for his buddy Mighty. We get to see Ray interact with Knuckles, battle Metal Sonic alongside Mighty, and hang out with Sonic and Tails. It was a great way of injecting Ray with a little bit of extra personality. He's goofy and obviously has a close bond with Mighty. They seem to be his two main character traits throughout all Sonic media. Sonic Mania Plus was Ray's big return, and he's pretty much stuck around ever since. In the past couple of years, Ray has appeared in official Sonic artwork, appeared as a skin in Sonic's 2021 Minecraft DLC, and has even appeared in a few lines of merchandise as well, something that I never thought would have happened for such an obscure character prior to Sonic Mania Plus. Ray has also made a couple of appearances in the ongoing IDW series of comics, though I think he's been designated as a quote-unquote classic character, who only appears in the confines of classic stories. IDW Ray is pretty jovial and friendly to pretty much everyone, and only seems to lose his temper when his best buddy Mighty is threatened. He's got this sort of smiley and harmless charm about him. And that is just about everything there is to say about Ray the Flying Squirrel, Sonic's cheeky little buddy. I often sign off these videos by saying something along the lines of, I hope this character gets more time in the sun. But honestly, it's not really feasible for every character to receive time in the spotlight all the time, considering just how many Sonic characters there are. I'm glad that Ray has re-emerged, and for quite a while I'll be pretty satisfied with the epicness of his Sonic Mania Plus comeback. Sometimes you've got to sit back and celebrate victories, and Ray fans have been eating good for years now. If you've got somebody that you want me to talk about, please do let me know in the comments. Just like Santa, I'm maintaining a list, but my list is characters that I think would be fun to cover. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.